There can be another viewpoint to it as well. This isn't often seen. We had a huge issue about credibility of accrediting organizations. The Knowledge Commission did a lot of studies which are made available. Sam Pitroda himself, when asked, and I'm talking about an published interview, said that, with all this e-governance and e-listing and so on, it says that basically all this is being used to continue what was done during the license Raj period or what the Raj left behind, and more or less it's a continuation of the same. He says, so when people ask him, are you happy with what's happening, or are they following what is? So this he says that no, they don't say that they've rejected my ideas, but they don't implement my ideas as well. So that's a very neat way of going around. And so they continue saying e-governance, but he says first, let us, like in business, we talked about business process re-engineering. So whenever there was e-enablement of a business, there was first look at the processes, redesigning the processes, and then implementing them in the new format. He says in the case of governance, it is usually the same thing, but you put computers also, you buy some hardware, software, etc., etc. So you actually generate employment because you have one set of IT people doing some job and the other non-IT people doing the same job, often at cross purposes. So India is a country where IT has really enhanced employment in some sense of the word. There are many other things which happened. Knowledge Commission, for example, in management education, made an interesting comment. It said that in India, management education is accessible only to those who are fluent in English, not just being able to know functional English. And why fluent in English? Because the test, the CAT, MAT and the alike tests they test for critical thinking, analysis, data analysis, comprehension, all kinds of stuff. But if you don't understand what is being written in the question paper, where does your thinking and analytical ability start coming? And since it's only about 5 to 6% of the population which can be called fluent in English, it's denied to everybody else. But by and large, creativity, innovation spreads all over. But the Knowledge Commission again didn't have the courage to say, let's do management education, all kinds of regional languages. So they created and proposed some convoluted method that let there be a management aptitude test which is in a number of languages. Then those people who have a managerial aptitude, they then go through an English course and then they learn about management. I think this is again not a very interesting approach for inclusive education because you can talk about more direct ways of doing it. But all that I'm trying to say is that lots of things are happening, lots of ideas have been generated, and the purpose of this event, and I hope that in 2011 this will really live up to its purpose, was to filter the significant from the insignificant. Because if you remember in yesterday Atul's presentation, we talked about needing amplifiers and filters, and that is the idea that we want to have this event for. So you'd say that this filters for you, that out of various noise that is made, these are things to look at and pursue for the next few years. And then of course, whatever we say, we use all this social media and other things to amplify our message. So I said this by way of few introductory remarks. So we are focusing here only on a few things, also because in a sense time was limited, and this has not been done in a very scientific manner that I can say what has been left out has very strong reasons, but it is more in terms of a broad understanding. Maybe some of it is wrong, there are more fundamental issues which have been missed out, but even if something very important has apparently been missed out, what is being considered is very important still, so we can be assured of that. So the basic themes we are talking about are this whole challenges, and we begin the day with Dr. Rajiv Tandon talking us about the global scene and key learning points from that. Then we want to focus on two things. One is management education. So we have Professor Madhulika Kaushik, who is been with Indira Gandhi Open University, probably the largest management education system in this country. She has a lot of experience of international education. She's been in Malaysia as part of Vasavan Open University. She's contributed to the design of courses to combinatorial learning called SEMPA and SEMPA. And in a couple of weeks, she will be going to Vancouver, the headquarters of the Commonwealth of Learning, and oversee all higher education across the Commonwealth countries. So in terms of even the group gathered here, I'm sure she will continue to interact with those countries in her new capacity. I've asked her to try to summarize in a few minutes key things, which is a big challenge. Here we have a broad description saying academic, but what she has as a title is Co-Wireless Management Education, Mapping Possible Direction. You see what has happened in the last 2 years, especially after the recession, the Lehman Brothers incident. Lots of questions have been asked about management education, and these questions have ranged from whether the content is fine or whether the personality. Some people have talked about ethics, etc., being very important components which have been missed out. There is a very interesting study, a very comprehensive study called Rethinking the MBA, which is published about a few months ago with Sanjeev Datar and 2 others, where they compared the best of management education in the world, and they've come up with some 8 or 10 points in which more needs to be done. They don't say it's inadequate because some people do keep trying. And there are very interesting lists, but among them, 2 or 3 key things which I wish to highlight are that one of the things they said that being in the atmosphere of an academic institution, when they come out to the field, understanding of organizational realities is a bit of a problem. So that's one major thing. On the other thing, which is very interesting, is that understanding of models and especially limitations of models is another thing. Because what happens is, in the last few years, the quants guy in management, especially in finance, had a kind of a field day, and they would create some formula, nobody would understand it, worked for a while, and everybody just continued observing the formula without seeing what was the reason, what was the limitation, what were the fundamentals behind it. And as Dr. Rajiv Tandon said yesterday so interestingly, and especially when you're at a point of inflection or more, particularly a saddle point, when along one dimension it is moving in one way and another dimension it's moving in another way, you can't predict what's going to happen. And not being able to understand those limitations of models was a key concern. The other was limitations of markets, because at one level economic thought has kind of progressed to a situation where we believe that markets are self-correcting, markets know everything. Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market, 2 people trying to quantitatively predict the market. And I think we're coming to this idea that we need to understand some of these limitations. There have been some other interesting developments around it in terms of our thinking, and this is in terms of 2 economics Nobel laureates some time back. In 2009, the Nobel Prize in Economics went to a lady called Elinor Alstom and another colleague of hers. And this Nobel Prize went for demonstrating by research and evidence, and you know it has to be serious demonstration to win a Nobel Prize, that many transformational things are best done not by governments or even by corporates, but by communities. Now, this is very interesting because nobody has broadcasted this, because neither corporates want to broadcast it, because corporates are here usually trying to say government can't do it, we'll do it. Obviously, the governments don't want to say that we can't do the welfare of the community. And therefore, in spite of the fact she's the first woman to get a Nobel Prize in Economics, you see no noise about her in the market. The Nobel Prize for 2010 in Economics goes to trying to make models for why there are gaps between what employers want and what employers get. And so these are key things that we've chosen for our things. So we've talked about, if you see the whole thing about yesterday was not about technology. If you remember, we said learning is fundamental, technology is incidental. And that is what we were trying to say. And I'm a great believer that we will see communities working together. And we talked, there's a big discussion about wikis the other day, and that is what it was, that communities could do better than an NCRT sponsor. I mean, you can take a wiki thing on any topic and take an NCRT book. You'll clearly find that the wiki will have much more information, etc., etc. So what I was trying to say is that we are moving towards a situation. The second part about employability, you see, one of the things is that all these people get Nobel Prizes for doing whatever. So, but do you apply any of those ideas for transformation? So One of the things we are saying is, and this is the key presentation after tea break where Rajiv Tandon and Dingral Mishra, how do we actually create employable people? And how do we create people who can be self-employed? And self-employed by doing good to others. Now, if we look at that, educating others is a very important thing. And in any society, any place, there is today a huge challenge of educating millions of people into finding a rightful place in the economy. Going back by that Nobel Prize study, it will not happen by the government. You can have a big Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, bigger Saskyavan. You now know that the bigger the project, the bigger the leakages, and so on and so forth. And nor will corporates be able to do it because they have to become very, very focused. And therefore, a community which is linked across geographies, across abilities, across talent is the answer. And we are therefore hoping that this will happen. And you see, we'll actually request both Dr. Rajiv Tandon and Dingral Mishra to discuss that in a little detail. We will not want to just go through that this is the concept, but say this is the plan. And why I am saying this, because 2011, we'd like to report results of that plan. That, well, we tried to do this, and this is what we've done, and if 100 people working together can do this, then what is the scalability, what are the options? So that. We also want to talk about some new ideas in education in the future. And for that, we have a session on something called blended learning environments. And the whole point about that concept of blended learning environments is for a long time, we have focused on, if not made here, it's no good. Not done here, it's no good. This came from some earlier approach to manufacturing where you made everything in a very large factory. And the famous example given, almost like a textbook example, is Henry Ford's car making companies. So he said he would own the fields in England where the sheep grazed on from whose wool the seat covers were made for the seats of that car. So everything you had. Today, you don't do that. You pick up things from whoever can do whatever that person can do best, and you have now car making companies who don't even make car engines. Or you have a brand which is something you don't even know from where it is actually made, because the brand is much more important. So if you hear Volkswagen, you probably think of it as a people's car, low-cost car. And then if you learn that Porsche is actually a subset of Volkswagen, it will give you a shock of a certain kind. So therefore the whole thing is completely different. And I think we see the same thing in education. We'll see that lots of different kinds of things will collaborate to create the learning experience for people. So we're talking about new ideas. We're quite happy to have new ideas come up, but from what we've gathered, as I said, Sanjay will talk about blending some of these things. There will be a presenter called Deepti. She will talk about some new media and its impact on education, interactive walls, talking walls, and so on and so forth. We have Mohan who had joined us yesterday afternoon. I don't see him right now, but probably he'll come in time. He will talk about largely carbon economics, but in the larger title of climate change studies and opportunity and an equalizer. And then, of course, we have Ankara. He's done something with what is an educated person in the second half of the 21st century, because unless we start anticipating, because in some sense, it's like a moving projectile kind of a situation. We're preparing youngsters today. They will become decision makers 40 years from now, that's 2050. So are we putting the right thing? Because psychologists tell us that in the first 5 years, a child's personality is largely determined. Now, therefore, what should we be doing so that we have the right people there? You can do anything, but the legal framework is something which is going to catch up with you. And therefore, we've got a very young lawyer who will probably come in and talk about some legal matters. Obviously, again, lawyers are used to large canvases. So I have suggested that she focus on the cyber law issues around, say, social media and e-learning, because we haven't talked about it. People talk about privacy, etc. But there can be many, many serious issues. We can casually post a remark on Twitter, but if it is defamatory, the entire laws of defamation apply to you. So it can be very serious. And I'm not talking only of Shashi Tharoor kind of stuff, but you can get into serious trouble. Now the whole difficulty is that because the medium is so... See, if you were to publish a book, you would look at it several times over, you will check it, cross-check it, make sure everything is accurate. Even if you do a research paper or a research article and so on and so forth. When you're writing on Facebook or Twitter or this, you, that's happened with an